Today I'm going to show you how to work with ink wash as a medium, and I'm just going to get into some basics about how it works because it is quite different from any normal paint if you've ever painted before. It's going to seem like it's a lot like watercolor, and it does have similarities in that both of them are aqueous mediums, meaning they both use water as a vehicle to sort of move the pigment across the page. However, the way that the pigment is concentrated is very different. So first I'll show you some materials. This is a sumi brush, and these are very often found in the Chinese brush painting section of an art store, and they're really useful because they can be shaped into a fine point and they can use larger areas. A lot of people want to start off using a watercolor brush when they do this, and that's okay later on, but I strongly encourage that you use this brush to begin with because it allows you to work both big and small when you're using the ink wash. So that's the first material. The second is India ink. Now, this comes in a variety of formats. Sometimes you'll find sumi ink, and it'll look like this. And in this case, it's called Soho. Higgins makes ink. There's a lot of Black Cat is another brand of ink that you'll find. And when you use it, it will work very much the same. The only difference is sometimes you'll see when you look at it that it'll let you know whether it is waterproof or non-waterproof. In this case, it's not indicating. The difference is if you get waterproof ink, it means that after it's dry, if it gets wet, it's much harder to move the material around. Non-waterproof ink means that you can sometimes re-wet it and move the pigment around a little bit. You can't quite erase what you've done, but it can do some of those things. So one thing that's really neat about this ink, when it comes in this format, is that it has an eyedropper. So that's a good hint, because this stuff is meant to be used sparingly. It's really best to not use a whole bunch of it because it is very concentrated. Think of it like an extract in baking, like vanilla extract or peppermint. Or even food coloring. You only put a few dabs into something and it really affects the color. So I'm just going to put a few dabs of it into here. And another thing that's really important about this is if you're aware of that and you use materials sparingly, it means that you are going to be able to preserve your materials for much longer. Now I'm going to use a little trick. I'm actually going to pull a piece of paper out of the sketch pad and I'm going to put it under my palette, because one thing that happens with ink is it's very easy to lose track of what pigments you have already mixed, because after a while everything will look the same, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment. I'm going to construct a value scale. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a little bit of water into this area, and I am just going to, paint with water, and it's white. I'm now going to take water and I'm going to put it into another little pot of paint, and I am going to very, 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 very carefully, and I'm just going to kind of wipe my brush down, get some of the water off. I'm going to take a very small dot, very barely a small dot of that. You can't even really see it on my brush, and I'm going to put it into there. Okay, I was really careful there. I'm going to get a little bit more. Okay, and that's going to be my lightest gray. Now watch, it doesn't seem like much in there, but you can see the difference between this and the clear water. I'm going to test it here. So it kind of makes the paper a little bit dirty, and that's what this lighter gray is doing. Okay, it's getting a little bit darker. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a darker value. Another thing is I'm painting on a watercolor paper, so this has more fiber in it, and it's going to take a lot better than just a regular sketch paper or drawing paper. Drawing paper is going to wrinkle. This is like a sponge, so it's going to absorb the ink, and then when the water evaporates, it's going to trap the ink in the paper. You'll get a lot more range that way, and I recommend splurging on a sheet or two if you're going to be working with wet media. Now I'm going to go in and I'm adding a few drops into here, and you can always test it on the side. my goal is to kind of make the next value just a little bit darker than the first one. Okay. Probably make it a little darker. Go a little bit more crazy. Okay. Good. So now I have the next value on the value scale. And that, is a useful way to sort of begin going about it. Sometimes you can hold up some paper toweling or something to soak up some of the excess. And I'm going to keep going. Okay. And I'm just going to take some of the ink. Ooh, got a little dark with that one. There we go. And it's getting a little bit darker. Great. And now I'm going to make a darker value. So that's a good reason to kind of mark how dark everything is off to the side of the page. It's because it helps you remember what's what. Okay, and now I'm going to go in. I might have made that a little too dark, and that's okay. A lot of time when you're just starting out, don't feel like, oh, it's all or nothing. I just made that too dark, and I can't go back. It's really okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just mix the value that's in between this one and that one to get the value that I need. And I'm just taking some of that value and putting it in that water. And what I did was I just got the next value. Great. And then I'm going to go back to this one. This is really good to practice when you first start using India ink because it really lets you know if you have control over it. And sometimes if you get excess, you can just dry your brush off on the side and you can go back into an area and it'll suck up some of the extra ink. And that's really useful. And then once you get to halfway, there's a point where you start using more of the ink and testing it on the side. Okay, still too much in there. Okay, great. Looks like I kind of have enough. Oh, see, that one's almost the same value. Let me see. I'm gonna add a little more ink into there. Just try to get it a little bit darker. Okay, and now you find yourself using a lot more of the ink. Another thing you can do is you can add ink to a color you've already mixed, so then you can work with it incrementally and just keep adding a little bit at a time so that you don't lose control over what it is that you're doing. So now I'm going to go in just with a little bit of this. Okay, I'm going to kind of use the one that's incrementally a little darker. Great. And you just want it to be gradual. You want to develop enough control over the medium that you have a gradual progression in the values as you keep going. Okay. Here I go. And you can get even more variation as you get better and better. When it dries, you'll really see the difference. And then you end up with like a straight black ink. And so I hope this is a good start to the process of using India ink. It is not that complex once you get the hang of it, but the most important thing to take away from this demonstration is that it is a very potent, very highly concentrated material, and you want to use it sparingly in the beginning, and slowly when you get to this area of gray, it's going to flip and you can start adding a little bit more India ink. But notice how I did all of this painting with just a drop of the India ink, and I have a lot left over to play around with. So if you follow those instructions, you're going to have a jar like this for a really long time. Good luck!